Seeing it is 7:30, I would like to welcome everybody here to the Chelmsford Finance Committee meeting of November 6, 2014. To let you know, the Chelmsford Telemedia is videotaping and recording this meeting, and I don't believe there's anybody else in the audience that will be using electronic devices or recording. I would like to start the minutes with approval of 2 sets of minutes, one October 2nd and one October 9th. I'd like to ask for a motion for the October 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any corrections, discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. A motion for October 9th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, corrections, changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda are the votes. We will have discussion, and Mr. Cohen has detailed information on the screen here, which will help us all understand what we're thinking about in relation to specific articles. The special town meeting articles that we're talking about tonight are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the first article will be to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a certain amount of money from which to pay the bills of previous fiscal years or act in relation thereto. And what we are looking at are unpaid bills from the school department in the amount of $141,350. Mr. Cohen?
Good evening, everyone. This unpaid bill article, and I'm going to ask Darlene to sort of walk you through it, but just to put it in perspective, they're unpaid bills of a prior fiscal year. Town council has advised that there are different categories of unpaid bills. For example, under the statute of unpaid bills authorization and appropriation, unpaid bills to another governmental agency, such as a educational collaborative, only require a majority vote. Unpaid bills that were incurred at the time there was sufficient appropriation require a majority vote, and unpaid bills that can be determined that when the services were ordered and services delivered that there was not any appropriation would require a 9/10 vote. So Darlene has done a detailed breakdown of those categories, and so what I'll do is I'll just start with the first one, which would be the ones to the collaborative, and you can see on the slide, those are the two amounts, and I'll ask Darlene to walk through those.
So we have two collaborative invoices, multiple invoices, but they just total them. I'm just putting them in totals. But the first one was the Crest Collaborative. Again, and you can see that the two dates, the vert date is actually when it was received, so it was kind of stamped and received in, but the second column is actually the invoice date. So you can see that those were dated November. That first one was November of fiscal of 2013. The receive date was in February, and then I did not receive it until 2 months ago. So can see that. The second one is the Merrimack Valley Collaborative. Again, the invoice dates there were September 1st, 2013, and they were received in March of 2014. And again, like Paul has just spoken, those would be a majority vote. That's in the statute of they're a public entity, so they would be considered a majority vote at town meeting. The next grouping of unpaid bills, you can see a list of them. They were kind of, these are the smaller amounts. These all had POs attached to them. So the vendor had received purchase orders for these. So the way that I've kind of went through them is that they had an appropriation. A purchase order was approved, given to the vendor. So as far as the vendor is concerned, these bills had an appropriation, and in good faith, these people did the performed the service. The service was delivered, and now we really need to pay these bills. So with those, with that understanding, that would fall under a majority vote. You can see the dates that they were, basically, the dates that they were received and the dates that they were dated were pretty close. I mean, there wasn't a lot of there was big difference there, but they were late invoices. They showed up in my office after the close of the fiscal year.
Were these encumbered?
Yes.
So you had money in there?
No. There were purchase orders against them, but when we got down to the end of the fiscal year, there actually wasn't enough to pay those invoices. So even though at the time that the purchase order was signed, we had appropriation, the time that they were received into my office, the appropriation no longer, or the money was no longer available to cover that. And the third group is the 9/10 vote. These invoices had no purchase orders attached to them. So there really wasn't any appropriation set aside for these. They came into you can see that the service date and the delivery date, they were all early May, early June timeframe. Enough time for them to come to get to my office to be paid. There still should have been money in the budget for them, even though they didn't have a purchase order against them. Because we're not talking, they weren't big dollar amount invoices. Again, the vendor, rendered the services in good faith, but unfortunately, these would have to be a 9/10 vote and not a majority vote because there was not an appropriation at the time.
Do you know why there wouldn't be a purchase order for these?
That's a good question.
Figured.
That's a question I can't really answer. The school department could answer
Just a
that.
minor one, they noticed that the R&R trophy, the service was $527, and you have invoice $519.
The actual, when the invoice date was, I think that these got switched a little bit. I think that it should have been, the invoice date was 5/27, and I'm sorry, the service date should have been on the yeah. That one might have got switched. Any other questions on the?
I have a question.
Sure.
The Kelly Services, excuse me, the 22,000, was that like for a extended duration of bills? Was that like for a month or 2 months or?
Yeah, that was the month of, that was basically I think those were the April invoices, that we received in May.
Excuse me.
So the three groups add up to the 141,
Yes.
350. So most of them are by majority vote, and there's some of them that are 9/10. So are those, how would we vote on those at town meeting? Are those a separate vote item, the majority versus?
There'll be three separate motions, so you'll vote one, and then when
Okay.
that vote's completed, we'll vote the second one, and then we'll vote the third one. So it'll be three sequential votes on.
Under one article.
I'm just still unclear as to the first two sections, the difference.
Oh, what we did is, why we put the collaboratives, because those are the collaboratives, so those were like what we wanted.
They're public.
The audit, the legal counsel recommended that we put the public entities separate.
Okay.
That's why. So you mentioned that there were no purchase orders for this last group, the 9/10 group.
There was no purchase orders.
Does that mean they never existed, or is it we couldn't find them?
When I looked, it looks as though the invoices were put in with no purchase orders, that for those, there was never a purchase order.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you understand how that could happen? within a Munis system?
That's one of the processes that we're looking at, that Mr. Sullivan with Melanson and Heath, we're looking at that. I believe that, no, that should not happen. We did a few testing with the system, and it was allowed to do that, but that's one of the things that we think that it shouldn't. And it's just set up in the system, it's just, I mean, it's.
Wasn't done.
Correct, right.
Okay, are there any other questions on this article?
Does it run out there?
I guess, do they have to do POs now?
Up to the microphone, Paul.
Bob Joyce, why don't you come up here?
Joyce. Seeing that there was no POs on that, shouldn't they have to do a PO in order, so your tracking will stay in place?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any questions, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, appreciate it, darling. So do we want to go on to the second article?
You want me to make a motion on this one here first?
We're gonna have to-
Did you want to go through
Yeah.
the four
Let's
and then
let's-
vote, or
let's-
did you want to vote on them as we go along?
Let's vote on them individually.
Okay, so as we go along now.
Is that we have a consensus on that?
No, I think we should at least go through the special town meeting articles, some of which we haven't seen yet, or discussed
I mean,
yet, rather.
Just vote on this first article, which is the one we just went through.
Who would like to go through the special town meeting articles, the four of them, and then vote, and versus vote them each one as we have discussion on them? I'm hearing difference.
I'm open to either way, but,
I'd rather do them individually myself.
I'm open to either way, but I see if we come back to them, like we're kind of double dipping, so my process is I prefer to like present it and.
Well, let me
and
try
then-
it by-
And then discuss and, but it's whatever the group wants, it's immaterial to me.
I'll make a motion that we approve Article 1 in the amount of,
141, 350.
yeah, broken down, the two that require majority and the one that requires 9/10.
I think we only need to vote on the total amount as a committee.
Okay, fine.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
So the motion is, did you have that, PM? Mm-hmm. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And discussion on this? Any other discussion? Any other questions?
Are we going to, so we're voting on
Article 1.
Article 1,
Yes.
whether or not to approve the payment. Are we going to make any statement as to how we're going to make the payment?
Well, this is, yes, probably should be in the motion. Where is it taken from? This is taken from strictly free cash.
From free cash.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous, thank you very much. Special Town Meeting, Article 2, 101 Mill Road. This is in relation to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise, a portion of parcel of land containing acreage and buildings thereon at 101 Mill Road.
Thank you. This is an authorization in appropriation to acquire a parcel of land located at 101 Mill Road. The article is sponsored by the Board of Selectmen, and let me just walk you through to bring people in the room and watching up to date on the property, and then obviously Bob can help me out as a member of the board if I don't get it correct. 101 Mill Road, and it's hard to see in the room, but hopefully it's clear in the thing, but is the Merrimack Education Center, for those who drive by that location. Maybe if we turn on the bar lights, that might help. No problem. Yeah, 50/50 chance. There you go.
That's a little better.
The 101 Mill Road has a building on it, an historic building. We believe it was constructed in 1816 as a residential building. It's been converted to office use and used as the administrative offices for the Merrimack Education Center. Here's a view of the building from the back. Just to give you some information about the building, it has 9 rooms. Basically, there's 5 bedrooms on the top floor. There's 5 rooms, again, thinking residential structure, living room, dining room, so forth on the main floor. Has 1 3/4 baths, 2 full baths, and 1 half bath. This is another view that you might see if you're coming from Mill Road, from the other direction, and you see it sort of perched up on the hill as you're coming up the roadway. And the assessed value for the property, according to the assessor's records, is $542,800. As I noted, the parcel is 1.77 acres, and this is the picture I took, obviously not today, because today it was raining, but this is the parcel I took as you look back towards the soccer fields would be to your left, and then the conservation land would be towards the back of the property. And again, here's another picture of the land on the property. Again, it's adjacent to the Murphy soccer field and the Russell Mill conservation land. And then the other thing to note, and as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of perched up high. As you look from that site, you basically look over the adjacent historic Millstream property, and as you can see, it's not far, and it's actually got nice views of the property, and obviously the pond would be to the left as you're looking back. And so it does have that height situation. So that is the background on the parcel. As I noted, the article is sponsored by the board. The board had directed me to enter into negotiations for the acquisition. We agreed upon an acquisition price of $490,000. The board of selectmen, as you know, will be making this recommendation this coming Monday evening. My recommendation is given that the events and information we received from the auditors in the last few weeks, and the uncertainty regarding, the financials of the school budget, and also the trends that we're seeing, as well as a lack of identified use for this property, it's my recommendation that the town would take no action at this time. But that's just my recommendation. As I said, this article is not my article. This article is that of the Board of Selectmen. And as I said, they'll be making their recommendation on Monday evening.
Bob Joyce,
Thank you.
would you like to join us?
Bob Joyce, 103 Turnpike Road, and also a member of the Board of Selectmen. I am speaking as one single selectman here tonight, because as Paul said, this has not come to the board yet. One of the things that I'm not crazy about putting this on hold is that we've made a gentleman's agreement with the people from MEC to take that property off the market, because at the time, we didn't have the other financial burdens on us to do that. The funding from this is to transfer $373,762 from overlay surplus and $116,238 from the sale of real estate. And we could still do that, but that would mean that less would go into the stabilization fund. And my personal opinion is we've got enough in stabilization right now. It's always good to put more in, but I think we have enough in there. It's between 5, I think the policy was between 5 and 7, Paul?
5 and 10.
5 and 10. And I think that we could probably sit it out. The other thing is that this purchase will protect this property from a 40B. We don't know if there are 40B people out there that are waiting in the weeds, but certainly we all know that Mill Road has gone through enough at this point. So I would recommend, and I will recommend at town meeting, that we not pass over this article and let people vote on it, because, and we'll have to figure out when we have our Board of Selectmen meeting how the funding will work exactly. We were hoping that Preservation would have this year's funds, but they haven't come in, and I think Paul said it could be December, or it could be January. With a new governor, we don't know. So I think that we should act on it and try to fund it. I understand the problem with the school budget and everything, but I think this is important to that area, and we ought to go forward. Thank you.
Oh, wait, maybe we have some questions. I have some questions.
Yeah.
Does anybody have questions for Bob?
I have a question. The question I have is, has any thought at all been given to what this building could be used for?
Very good
Any thought?
question, very good question. We just acted on this within the past couple of weeks. We originally, the Housing Authority was going to take it and maybe make some units out of it or do something else with it, but their funding is such that they couldn't see having money available to do it at this time. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct.
Yep, okay, good. I'm thinking that we will find a use for it, okay? And maybe by the 17th, we might come up with some suggestions. But certainly, if we were to hold on to it, and maybe it could become, something for the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or something like that. If we held it a few years and hoping the economy is going to improve, we could always get rid of it. I wish we could buy it, sell it.
Yeah, but then you'd be right back into the same problem.
No, because we'd be able to pick who our buyer was. Right, Paul?
Well, if you put that in your RFP.
Yeah. So we could block the possibility of that.
What do you mean?
There are other opportunities, I think if the word gets out that that's available, there's daycares and mini schools, nonprofit schools and stuff that might be
We
interesting.
also lose the tax revenue from that building as well, right?
Right, if we hold it that way.
Well,
That's right.
if you buy it, you lose the tax revenue.
We're not getting any right now.
You're not paying any taxes?
No, they're not paying any taxes
Because they're a public entity, is that why?
because they're a nonprofit.
But if if a profit company purchased it, we
Yeah.
would receive taxes from it.
Yeah, but it's not zoned properly for a business. It would have to go through a rezoning. A nonprofit could go in, but then again, we lose the revenue.
One of your favorites this is a what if we did buy it, would the town consider putting a preservation restriction on part of that land so that, the land that abuts the Murphy soccer fields and the land that abuts
Yeah. If we had the ownership of it, then we could probably carve out what we needed
Right.
and sell it later. And also, I think Paul had said something about if we sold it to someone, we could put a preservation restriction on it.
Okay.
So,
My concern is that there's no definitive use that-
right,
at this time.
right. We can, by the 17th, I'm sure we can come up with suggested uses,
Right.
but we don't have someone waiting at the door right now, so.
So I guess my question would be, how are we going to maintain this, if we do go ahead and we fund and we purchase this property? We're going to have a building that's an older building. It's a nice building, but it's an older building, that we're going to have to maintain and pay for maintenance of. Do you foresee how we're going to
Well,
do that?
outside of, if it's non-occupied, then outside of electricity and heating, which would be at a minimum, to just keep it so the pipes don't freeze.
But it would still be an additional cost.
Yeah.
What's the square footage?
Paul?
It's a larger building, 9 rooms,
It's got to be about
assessed at,
6,000 square feet, maybe?
What was it, 1816? I mean, it's been updated.
Plus,
The living area is 4,316 square feet.
Okay. It's a nice-sized building.
and it's not very new. So,
But I do believe it has been recently updated.
I'll bet it has.
Yeah.
I'll bet MEC has
Has it been
done something.
upgraded to code and everything? the wiring and all that to code?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the building with Gary Persichetti, our facilities director.
You checked it out?
Yeah, it's been well maintained.
Okay, so there's no problem with,
I mean, it's not ADA accessible, but it's maintained in
Yeah.
terms of there aren't any issues, in care, because again, up until recently, they were housing their
but
administrative
there's no
office.
elevator in there or anything?
No, and the floors are, that age where
Yeah.
it's not one level even on the main floor.
Yeah, if it were accessible, then certainly we could probably see a group home in there. But, and not a bad neighborhood to have it in, because, it's pretty spread out from the mill, the old mill and stuff, so. Anyway, that's
all right.
one selectman's take on it.
Okay.
By the 17th, I'm sure we'll have more information about what the rest of the board wants to do.
Paul, is there any time limit on your offer?
Yeah, yes, I think if this doesn't get approved at this town meeting, they'll continue to market it. I think at that point, they probably would have felt they had enough to do with the town, because, as Bob noted, it's been several months that the town has been looking at this property, going back to Preservation Committee, when they were looking to do something with the Housing Authority in terms of the administrative offices, which would have freed up the units, would have freed up the admin space at McFarland and created some units. David spent a couple months on it. When he brought his architect and crews in, he felt it wasn't financially feasible. So then we went and discussed with the Millstream next door to see if they were interested in the property. So that took another month or so. They came back ultimately and said, we don't want the burden and don't know what to do with the building. So they walked away, and all this was going on with community preservation.
Right.
And then finally, when there were no other avenues of resort, it then came back to the Board of Selectmen, and the board said, well, let's see if we can bring it to the town for approval for acquisition. But again, one of the difficulties that Bob noted is we don't have any capacity to borrow into community preservation, nor any community preservation fund distribution thus far, that we could apply to the project. So again, given the amount of time and the back and forth we've had with the Merrimack Education Center, my guess is if this doesn't go through, they're going to say, hey, you know what, we're done dealing with the town.
Mac owns this place? Mac owns this?
No, Merrimack Education Center owns it,
And
yes.
who is the board that runs that?
Yes, and they're a director, so
And who's the director?
Their board has agreed to the sale price with the town of the $490. Their current director has sort of facilitated, much like I have on the town side, and so that's where it stands. But they have moved their offices out, and I think they're over on Brick Hill Road now, and so they're basically actively on the market. They had the property listed for $539 for several weeks before the town reached an agreement, and so this is where we are at this point.
So it's a very good price for the land and the building, where it's assessed at $542,800, and the purchase price they're asking is $490. And there are multiple uses that it could be used for, we just don't know exactly what right now. And Paul, your reasoning for not proposing this to be purchased is because of the problems with the school?
Right, it's multifold. I'm concerned, as I noted in the memo that I sent out, I'm just concerned about the sustainability of our operations going forward. And again, what troubles me about this is, again, if it were community preservation monies, I'd say, hey, those monies are restricted, we can't do that. This would be general monies that are available for any purpose for the town. And then also, I think what's troubling is we don't have an identified use. If we were coming and we were saying, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to work with David Hedison to build veterans housing or something like that, then I'd say, hey, let's go for it, because we've seen the support in the community for that type of use. But David and the Housing Authority are not interested in this parcel. And so therefore, we don't, as Bob noted, we haven't identified a partner or a particular use at this time.
But that could change in the future.
Right,
If he comes up with more money, but he just doesn't see it in the foreseeable future.
Right.
It might be gone by then.
So you really think that the Board of Selectmen would have suggestions so far as use?
Yeah, I think by the 17th, I'm sure we'll come up with some ideas and see if they're feasible.
What do you think about next week at your meetings?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to discuss it, so, I mean,
I just, it's such a wonderful property. I just have such a problem because there's nothing definitive about it.
yeah. Well, the big definitive thing for me, is that it's right next to the soccer field, and that some of that land could be carved out for parking in the back, even if we sell it later. But we would sell it as a residence, because we don't want a business down there, nor is it zoned business. So, and they operated under a subset of the bylaw that allowed that type of operation to run a business type of operation out of that building.
Any questions?
I don't think I have any real questions. I think the idea to, be proactive and stop property from being picked up by 40B developers is something I'm supportive of, and it's a beautiful property. I think it comes down to the timing of the situation and not knowing exactly what we would be able to do with it, as well as the, shall we say, the tight financial situation that we're in at the moment. So, I don't know.
I guess,
I support this. I think it's very important that we purchase this property. I think the funds are available. There's in the, what do you call it, account, the stabilization, there's plenty of money. And I just think, you have one shot at this, and we don't know if we don't get it, what's going to happen to it. I just think it's a good deal. 500,000, is it?
490.
490. I think it's a buy. If I can, knowing my area, what the properties are going for and so forth, I think this is a buy. I think it's well worth, and I think we should purchase it.
Well, the two funding sources it would come out of that's suggested prior to today from Paul is the sale of real estate and the overlay surplus.
Yeah.
Well, they can change that by town meeting if there's other sources
Right.
of revenue they come up with. But, the fact that they come up with this source of revenue is fine with me.
If I can interject, I think the 373 from the overlay surplus, is your plan to put that in stabilization? Is that what- Yeah, so, I mean, it just wouldn't go to stabilization.
Oh, yeah, really.
And the other one is pretty much when you sell a piece of real estate, you kind of have to buy another piece of real estate or put it towards a real estate type thing, so. We just wouldn't put the 373 into the stabilization fund, and I think we're pretty safe. We have not drawn on the stabilization fund, I don't think, in the past year or two. So hopefully, we don't have a disaster, but I think it's a good deal, but.
I guess my concerns are threefold. The first and most important one is we don't know yet what we're going to be dealing with as far as the school situation. And like Paul said, I'm a little hesitant. I mean, this property is great. I mean, I grew up playing soccer on Murphy Field.
Right.
It's a nice location. It's a great place. To preserve that would be fantastic. It's a good price. We don't have a set use for it, like Kathy was saying as well. And I'm not sure if the town wants to be a landlord, and B, my other concern is that the property is older, so it's not ADA compliant, and I'm not sure if it would fall under an exception should we go forward with something else. So my concern with that is the conversion to comply with ADA, should that need arise, is expensive. It's not a cheap process.
Right.
So we would be purchasing a property, and then we'd have an issue with maybe ADA compliance should we go forward with using it in a certain form or fashion. So I guess I'm gonna toss up at this one because it is a nice piece of property. I would love to see it taken by the town and preserved. I'm just not sure that with the uncertain financials, it makes 100% sense.
Yeah. Well, depending upon.
And it's a shame.
Yeah. Depending upon what the use became, it may not have to be
Dictate, yeah.
ADA, so, I mean,
So do you think that the board, your board, next Monday is meeting and this is a topic on their agenda? This particular,
yes.
do you think there's any additional information that will be brought forward in that discussion, or just Any additional facts about use or?
There might be. Having the questions here tonight has certainly helped, that we need to nail down a potential use, how it may be utilized, and that type of thing.
Something just popped in my mind now. So if we purchase the property and it's vacant, would we be incurring any liability? Should it be like enticing for young children who should be playing soccer but decide they want to go in on exploration? Or, I mean, is there any potential liability for an empty piece of property that the town
There is,
owns?
and in fact, the closest analogy we have to that is when we take a tax possession property, as John does as treasurer-collector. When we have a vacant building, if it stays vacant, we have to buy a special insurance policy on that property because it is a vacant parcel. So that, because it's the risk of liability on the site being vacant, not only in terms of what could happen to the pipes freeze, there's nobody there, things come down. Also, you don't want people going in there and taking the copper pipes and all the other
Right.
situations. So, so it does sort of present, a similar concern to the fire station site. So you leave it empty and then it's up there and it's remote. Now, obviously with MEC there, they're not there on nights and weekends either. There is a fire alarm system obviously in the site, and there is a burglar intrusion alarm. But yes, we would have to acquire an insurance policy.
Is that a nominal cost or is that a six?
It's a few $1,000s to do that annually, because we regularly purchase them for tax possession properties.
So,
It's
Paul, if it became our possession, though, wouldn't it be under our blanket policy?
No, when we acquire a building, because when we go over a list of buildings with the insurance company, they want to know that they're occupied.
Oh, okay.
And I've been thinking for the last few weeks as well, as who could I move over there and do that, to have it occupied? Because in meeting there with Gary, that was his concern as well, is what do we do with this vacant property? And, we don't want that risk of damage or,
Right.
either vandalism or natural. But thus far, we haven't come up with a potential,
So by Monday, we will put our heads together individually and try to come up with something that we can bring up at the
Could we, as a
meeting.
body, possibly make this contingent upon them coming up with some viable uses for this?
Well, we may come up with uses that you don't like, so,
I would like to wait to see
Yeah.
what they have to say.
I mean,
Fine.
if you're posted at town meeting, even as late as town meeting, but we might know something
Right,
by next Monday, so.
right. And with the square footage, it's 1.77 acres. It's beautiful lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if it was $2,000 to have a liability policy, and how much would the heat
It could be a few $1,000s, because vacant property, it requires a special insurance and it's good that it's burglary
Right.
stuff, and it's good that it has the fire
Fire
system.
alarm, yep.
But all these insurance companies, a lot of insurance companies won't even touch vacant property, because they look at it and say it's too much of a liability because no one's watching it. So these policies are set at a premium price by people that are willing to take on that extra risk. Because that's an extra risk, you get the extra price on it. We're talking more than a couple thousand. We're talking probably, based upon the square footage and the size, at least a few thousand.
We could find that out probably before town meeting, yeah.
I think we can wait on it. I think we should.
I would like
think
to
we
wait.
should
I'd like to find out more
Okay.
about it, because it,
Okay.
So shall I make a motion that we wait?
Withhold our judgment until,
So I move that we postpone a decision on Article 2, 101 Mill Road until
till,
after the selectmen meet and discuss
Uses.
use and other details.
yes.
yes,
Does
okay.
that make sense to everybody?
Yep, yes.
Do we have a date certain that we would discuss that? Because we do have the special town meeting come up on the 17th.
We should do it we can do it on the 17th.
We do it on the 17th before town meeting?
Yes.
As long as you
Yeah.
post.
As long,
Yeah, post it 2 days before, right?
So I will add to that motion at our November 17th pre-town meeting.
Special meeting before
Special.
the special town meeting on the 17th. That's great, okay. So we're voting on this, so that was the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? I just have a comment.
Yeah.
The more information, the better.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, on to Article 3 of the special town meeting. This is to vote to transfer from Sewer Enterprise Fund free cash a certain sum of money, which is $350,000, for the reconstruction of the Mill Road Sewer Pump Station. And, Paul.
Yeah, I didn't bring a picture of a sewer pump station. But the bottom line is, this is actually, the pump station actually serves the end of Mill Road that we're speaking of. Where we're looking at the house there. So it has nothing to do with the 40B or anything else at the other end of Mill Road. Basically, the pump station is over a generation old. It needs to be upgraded and expanded in capacity because, as many recall, when the sewer was originally designed, it wasn't meant to the original plan wasn't to sewer the entire town. So basically, at this point, the plan is to complete the job, get the capacity out there sufficient, and have this done. Now, the important thing here is this fund comes from the sewer enterprise operations, which is basically their free cash, their unrestricted fund balance. So those are restricted monies that can only be expended on sewer capital or operational needs. And so therefore, it makes sense to go forward with this because the funding is available, and it is a necessary project to complete. And in fact, in working with the sewer folks, we'll be coming back in the spring to do another project, pumping station. I believe Progress Ave is the next one in line. So again, it's just doing our due diligence in terms of maintaining and operating a sewer system.
Thank you. Any questions? Like a motion, please?
Make a motion.
You want to read it? It's up there.
I move that the town transfer from sewer enterprise fund free cash the sum of $350,000 for the construction of the Mill Road sewer pump station.
Thank you. A second, please.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. On Article 4, I don't know if we really have to vote on this because there's no appropriation to it, but possibly there
probably is a related
financial-
financial,
Yes.
and I can take a moment to sort of make you familiar with the property. Basically, what I've got is a couple of slides. Let me bring you up to date with 27 Katrina Road, which is behind I guess we call it the Chelmsford Mall, for those of you who are familiar with it. Glen Avenue becomes Katrina. When I arrived here 8 years ago, the town had just acquired the property the previous August as a tax title possession. The difficulty with the property is it's the town's real major brownfield site, meaning it's a contaminated soil site. So when I arrived, we not only had contaminated soil building, we also had a contaminated building in which there were a bunch of debris and activities in there. So we had, you don't have to go through all the details, but bottom line is we've worked with the DEP, with Mass Development, Community Development, Evan Belansky and I, and Gary Persichetti and such, to basically clear the site. And that's been done. We were able to do that with DEP, EPA, and Mass Development funds. We then, over the years, and again, this is an 8-year process, a year ago, we were able to do a model testing program where basically they injected hydrogen peroxide and other materials into the soils to address the contamination. The testing worked. So now we believe that it's going to cost about $1.3 million to remediate the soils and groundwater that's there. And then there's probably a run-out cost because you then have to monitor the site and do soil samplings and water samplings for several years and then do reporting to the DEP. With all that information known, we went out and issued an RFP this past summer to sort of say, hey, is there somebody, here's the known cost to clean up the site and the runoff. Here's the property, is there anybody who'd be willing to acquire this parcel? Because our goal is to put it back on the tax rolls, put it back into active use. It is industrially zoned area of town. We got no takers on that RFP. But we did receive some interest from a couple of solar companies. And so we worked with National Grid to determine could a solar farm be operated at the site? And the answer is yes, it can be. However, for a solar farm, that's a long-term investment. And so what we discussed with the DEP and Mass Development is look, under the brownfield laws, when the town takes it as a tax possession, we're not subject to the liability responsibility for the cleanup of the site. However, if the town utilized the property for a beneficial municipal purpose, then you would assume that responsibility. That's why you don't see us taking the problem site up in Drum Hill, the Glenview site. That doesn't qualify for a brownfield, but if the town were to take that for tax possession, we would then be responsible as the owner to remediate it because the brownfield laws don't pertain to landfill sites. But anyway, back to this. So we basically regrouped. In the meantime, this fall, the legislature replenished the brownfields fund, the state brownfields fund, with $50 million. We've submitted an application that will be before Mass Development on the 25th of this month to acquire the $1.3 million that would be necessary to remediate the site, to do the cleanup. However, what we understand, the condition of Mass Development, if that were to be approved, that they would only approve such a grant if the town had a identified developer and who would take the property. So they're not going to just throw the money in because, again, their mission is to not only to help with the redevelopment, but also to create jobs, and obviously they've got others vying for their dollars. So if this were approved, what we're seeking from the town is we're seeking for the authorization to convey the property. So we would put out an RFP in January if this is approved, hopefully have results by March, and if it went for a sale, then the town would exercise the sale, even if it were for $1, just to get it back on the tax rolls. A party would come in, they could develop it. There were some limited use limitations, obviously, because of what's in the soil. They have to put vapor barriers and so forth. But the bottom line is there would be an active use. It would go on the tax rolls, create money, the grant would come in, and then the new owner would be responsible for that ongoing monitoring cost, which on an annual basis would not be material to the overall operations that what they're doing there. If there is no such interest, because again, the industrial market is not very strong, and you probably have industrial company may be able to lease space more effective than purchasing in this situation. Then our fallback plan would be to lease it for up to 20 years for a solar facility, which would generate power, and then the revenues from that operation would then pay for the ongoing monitoring. And the difficulty there is we would enter into an agreement with the Attorney General's office for a covenant not to sue, because again, we don't want to be, as a owner of the land and leasing the property, we don't want a liability coming in. And we've had the Attorney General in this room, not the Attorney General, she was busy, but a representative from the Attorney General's office helping with us to towards that, and we believe that's attainable. So that would be our fallback plan, but again, we would only execute that in the event that parties came forward. But in order to do that, then we need the town meeting authorization. Just the last piece on the solar, the town, because of our investment in the solar arrays on the school sites and DPW, and also our commitment to the Bolton Orchard site, we don't have the capacity to take the power off the site. So what we likely would do is we probably would come back, if this were to move forward, and go to town meeting and get assistance, would be to do a community solar project, in which basically we would sort of be the backstop, but in essence, we would provide the opportunity for those residents in towns whose homes don't have conditions that allow for solar, but to buy in. And we've seen this happen in a few other communities. It's in Massachusetts now, it's sort of becoming a resource opportunity. So long story short, it's not an appropriation, but it does have financial implications for the town. I can't tell you the amount of time we've spent in the last 8 years addressing the situation. I can tell you, we received hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to where we are today from DEP, EPA, and Mass Development, and you know, in the brownfield support team, and we hope that this may be the final push to finally get the site back on the market. So that's what we're seeking. So the town meeting vote, again, isn't financial. We're just seeking the authorization, you know, to convey the property and/or to lease it, provided that one of those opportunities comes forward. And that's why you have this long written motion, because in essence, we're not going to exercise any of those two options until we have a developer. Thank you for your patience through all that.
Thank you. Oh, we might have some questions.
Okay. No, I'll be-
Questions at either end of the table?
I noticed, Paul, that it says 8/8/2011.
Yeah.
You have a later one?
Well, the later one is clear. I mean, you know,
Oh, it's all clear
yeah,
now.
the sound is all cleared. I mean, we went in there and removed everything. It's kind of hard to see the photos, but we removed everything.
Okay.
But again, so you can see, it's been over 3 years since we did the demo of the building. So this thing's moved at glacial speed on that. You know, and it was just a lot of work. But right now, when you drive by it, it's just a slab. I mean, there's nothing there. You walk by it on the rail trail, it's just an open space. It is fenced off because, you know, we didn't want intrusion from either neighbors or anybody doing unwanted, you know.
And that's right on the Bruce Freeman Trail too,
Exactly,
correct? Yeah.
Does it back up to 495, pretty close to?
Yes, 495 is on the other side.
Other
If
side,
you go
yeah.
the other side
Okay,
of the, of Katrina Road,
Yeah.
it's 495.
So
So Japan Namalac is next one on one side, and then
Yeah.
there's this large equipment company that,
The storage facilities around the corner, yeah.
So ultimately, it will be financially supporting the town in a way, and it also the people within the town, the
right,
citizens.
and I think the critical thing is if, you know, we would like to take the opportunity of, if this $1.3 million is available, we'd like to grab that,
Right.
because it wasn't available 4 months ago, and it may not be available in the future, so it is a good opportunity to hopefully get this property cleaned up and get a buyer, because, I mean, you look at it on a map, it's a great location. You're between 495 and Route 3, you know,
Yeah,
but
perfect, right.
but it's, you know, not not given the risk and the situation.
How many years has it been? Probably.
Again, it's been 8 years. When it went back,
Yeah.
this went back to the 90s. It was a silicon manufacturing facility, and there were multiple contaminants into the soils, and it sat vacant. It was directly monitored by the DEP because it was a Tier 1 site, for those who follow that jargon. So it was really no fault of the town that it never got addressed while it was in use.
Okay.
And then it became vacant, and then disrepair, and then it became a sick building, which is one of the reasons we knocked it down. It was moldy and everything else, and so we've incurred all that effort, but now it's the point where, you know, we're finally moving this thing along. And this is an extraordinary length project, you know, duration, as you can imagine.
Very good.
I think this is a good move. I think it's a good acquisition, and I think that we should
Both the transfer?
support it, yes, support the transfer, yes, yeah, right.
The way it's written currently, it protects
Yeah,
us from
yeah.
losing that availability of funds.
Yep.
And it's an if, as, and when for the sale and lease. It doesn't make any sense not to
So
approve,
it's a
to
win-win-
go
it's a
forward with
win-win
this.
situation, yeah.
Would somebody like to put a motion on the table?
Put a motion that we approve special town meeting article number 4 as written.
Which includes a town transfer.
We'll
Parcel.
waive the reading of it.
No, I'd like to have that in there.
Okay, read it then.
All right, Tom,
I move that the town transfer a parcel of town-owned land located at 27 Katrina Road, identified as Lot 2 on Assessors Map 52, Block 234, from the tax title custodian to the Board of Selectmen to be held for the purpose of lease for sale. Okay?
That's fine.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much. And a second, please.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that is the special town meeting articles completed. Now we move on to the adjourned town meeting. I have, the first one, we're going to be looking at Articles 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We are going to look to reconsider those votes that we took on September 25th, I believe it was. I'd like to hand out to the committee information about the first Article 4 in relation to the fiscal year 15 budget, and this is in relation to the school department situation and the deficit analysis. So this is the detailed information that the school department went over at their meeting and also at a tri-board meeting. It was probably very difficult for people to print out, so Frank Antonelli very kindly printed it out and got it over to the town offices so that we could have this to look at.
Oh, two more.
So, Mike Rigney is here, chairman of the school committee, and Paul Cohen and John Souza, our treasurer. I don't know if John wants to speak about this, but whoever would like to address the committee in relation to this, please do.
All right, yeah, this is the big number, so we might as well start with that.
I'd like to preface this. I would like to hold all of these articles till we discuss them, and then we can vote them after we discuss them. Does anybody have a disagreement with that? As opposed to what we just did?
No,
for the special town
I'm
meeting?
happy to follow whatever you would like, Sheila.
I think it would be a smart decision to do
Right.
that.
Mr. Rigney.
Okay, for the record, Mike Rigney, 19 Billricker Road, Chair of the Chelmsford School Committee. All right, we all sat together Monday night, and at that time, I believe you were told that we were looking at $878,340 in unpaid FY14 invoices that moved into FY15, $141,245 in unpaid FY14 bills, and a projected shortfall for FY15 of $350,000. When the school committee met the following evening on Tuesday, two of those three numbers had changed. The unpaid bills has increased slightly. It's now $141,350. That was an additional bill that came in I think that day, actually. We had a little bit of a discussion about that, there was some concern expressed that if this number is still moving, is there a concern that it moves between now and town meeting? And the answer was that there is a mechanism in place for dealing with late bills, and it is this unpaid bills maneuver, and that vendors are aware of it. So, first of all, the expectation is that there aren't any vendors who are still going to be submitting bills. It's rather remarkable that one got submitted this late. They all understand that if they don't have their bills to us in July, they're going to have to wait till town meeting. And typically, that doesn't happen in November. Typically, that can be, it's very late to be getting a bill. And if we did get another one, it could be reasonably withheld until the spring town meeting. So we think the $141,350 that was in Article 1 is a good number now. The projected shortfall for FY15, you'll recall at the meeting that there was considerable discussion about uncertainties associated with that number. The biggest one being in utilities. Well, I won't say the biggest one. Several areas of concern. The utilities usage was one of them. The possibility of additional sped costs was another. They're a little bit different in their uncertainty, though. The sped costs are basically a stochastic phenomenon. If you have a family move into town, you're going to have increased costs. That's something that happens every year. There's nothing unusual about the situation that we're in now. The utilities are a little bit different. As you'll recall, the budget was, the typical 3% increase in the school budget, back when we put the FY15 budget together, was decreased to 1.5%. And that was based on projections that the ESCO project would save us approximately $750,000 or so in energy costs. At this point, those projections don't seem to be on track. You all got an email from, I think, Darlene, showing that a number of schools have seen reduced energy costs, but that the high school and the central administration building have not. And as a result, if you look on the FY15 original appropriation, the utilities is the section at the bottom of at the very end of it. It's the last section, essentially. If you compare the original appropriations with the year-to-date actuals from FY14, the ones that have been corrected, in many cases, the year-to-date actuals in FY14 are greater than the appropriations for FY15. And in fact, there was 884,948, it looks like, year-to-date actuals in 2014 once misapplied bills are corrected for.
But yet, what was the budgeted for 15?
What was budgeted for 15 was 452,124. Now that, again, recall that was done with deliberation and intent, that number was supposed to decrease, right? Because we were going to have the savings realized from the ESCO.
By that much?
I believe that was a question that was asked here. I know it was asked at the school committee. Kathy McWilliams was asked, how did you come up with your energy costs? And her answer was, I looked at last year and I took out $750,000. That was the plan at the time.
Okay.
And I just want to pause here, so, and Mr. Cohen had did you give advice on the reduction of the utility energy costs based on a formula, right?
Right, and the reason is that there's three components to the savings.
Yeah,
One is the 28 conservation measures which have been completed throughout this district and the community. The other two are from the operations of the solar arrays. Those arrays have not come online yet. They are 95% complete. What's remaining to be done is the ground mount at Harrington. I received 2 days ago the National Grid approvals for the online metering for those sites. So basically, if that moves forward, we expect that those will become operational within a month or so, 30 days. And then in addition to that, becoming the power into the schools that are from the solar arrays, you also get the SREC credits, which are the credits for the solar power that are sold into the private market. So in essence, the reason you're not seeing it thus far, however, those things will kick in the last 6 months of the year. That being said, the selectmen will be discussing on Monday night whether we wish to modify the arrays further to actually send all the power off of the site into the grid, because that would actually generate an even greater savings of close to $2 million over a 20-year period by virtue of the fact of what's gone on with the electricity and energy markets right now as it's forecast. So we'll be discussing that on Monday night. So the bottom line is substantial completion of this project is November. That's where we are now. The question is do we pause for another 60 days or so to do this arrangement? But the bottom line is it isn't just an apples to apples from last year to this year. Also, our electricity contract for supply went down this year by 15%. In other words, what we're paying, because we don't pay the National Grid default rate, we actually procure that. Okay. So our price went down. So that's why we're puzzled as to why the costs are up at the high school and at the administrative building, when they have a lesser electricity cost for supply, which again is only one component of a bill. You got the transmission, and then you got the supply. But secondly, they have been receiving the net metering credits. And then third, why is the consumption up? What we believe is that there may have been units at the high school, which is a large building, that perhaps may not have been functioning before they were replaced and repaired, which would now lead to operating costs. That might be part of the component. We also are a little disturbed by the fact that the electricity cost during the summer months is not very different than the fall months, which leads us to believe that perhaps, for example, maybe people weren't diligent in having lights off in the buildings when there was nobody in the building. So we're just sort of scratching for this as well, because none of us foresee, because you do see it at the elementary schools. You see a decline of, and you saw that data of significantly at the 4 elementary schools. You see it at McCarthy, but yet you didn't see it at Parker, and you didn't see it at the high school or the admin building. So, all the buildings are different, we understand, but also some of the energy savings isn't just electricity. There are also natural gas and boilers and insulation and other measures where we're just entering the heating system. So I just don't want to give the impression that this energy performance contract has been a failure. What we're basically saying is we're in the implementation stage, but thus far it is troublesome because we're into now November.
In the evaluation phase, but so I guess I just want to that point, stipulate that this is a new process and it is something that should be evaluated. And so a best attempt at a budget line item was made. And in this case, it's no fault of anyone. It's just getting the program going.
And the way that all of that relates to the matter that you're considering tonight is the uncertainty in what that right number should be.
I have a question. In a situation like this, where you're going into a new power system and new rates and less consumption, shouldn't somebody be watching it to see if it's actually happening?
Well,
obviously, nobody was watching it, and this thing started creeping up when it should have been creeping down. So it seems to me that there's a lack of responsibility here on somebody's part to not be tending the store, because, I mean, it's a big plant, and they should be watching each individual school. And it looks as if the high school is the one that's the problem, so somebody should have been watching that.
Well, to be fair, I think that's what the town manager is describing right now. We have identified this problem. I think, to the best of my knowledge, it was caught in a financial analysis.
It was a default.
Rather than in an energy analysis.
Right.
But I think you're hearing that there is a plan. The question of whether the solar gets transmitted directly to the schools or not, we're gonna be supportive of whatever the town thinks is best for the town. And we're gonna work with them on identifying the causes of the unexpected lack of reduction or lack of savings at both the high school and the central administration. I mean, central administration is not one of the big buildings in town. So there may be, I think Paul's advancing at least a preliminary theory about something that might be having an effect. We're going to run that down. We're going to work, the schools will work with the town and to figure out if that's right, and we'll work to correct it as we move forward. I don't think it's a matter of nobody watching it.
We do have a full-time energy coordinator who just came on in the last 2 months, and that's why we get this data. That's why we got it so fast. We do track every account. The other thing to note is, think about the administrative building. The big thing that's done there that consumes power is that's our hub for our IT networks.
Right, yeah.
And so there could have been some changes in there, because again, anyone who knows about how those things work, you have to have cooling.
Sucks a lot of energy.
And so that could be, again, so those are the unintended situations that arise where, again, like you said, if you just do a linear comparison, but, we might go back and say, hey, look, if you've done work in servers and the efficiency of those rooms, that could, because, again, just the office itself at the admin over the summer, you wouldn't, there'd be no reason to have increase, but we believe it's probably related to the IT operations that are there.
So again, what I think you heard Monday night was that there's some uncertainty in this utility number. And so going back, again, the original appropriation for FY15 was significantly less than the actual expenses in FY14. If you look at the year-to-date actuals for FY15 and the encumbrances, we are very close to the original appropriation. The original appropriation was 452,124. The year-to-date actuals are 209,303, and the encumbrances 225,778. The number, the projected shortfall for FY15 that you received Monday night did not make any allowances for kind of a realistic estimate of what our energy costs were going to be. That was what changed Tuesday night. John Sullivan and Frank Antonelli worked together to try to get a more realistic estimate of the number. When they incorporated that, the FY15 projected deficit increased to 588,751. There is one other significant difference in that projected deficit. Again, as was discussed Monday night. On Monday night, the salaries for the 2 laid-off administrators had not been removed from the encumbrances. So essentially, we were counting on no savings there. Tuesday, they had in fact removed those salary lines from the projection. And the estimated amount of that, I think, is 138. So the current projected deficit of 588,751, the short story is it already has that good news in it. So we have a situation then where what was proposed was that to cover the shortfall due to the FY14 bills coming into FY15, we would expend all of the school choice revolving fund, the current school choice revolving fund, which is approximately $573,000. That would leave a balance of 305, 340 coming out, that represents FY14 bills that have already been paid with the FY15 money. When you add that number to the projected deficit of 588,751, you get $894,000 and $894,91. It was proposed to take another $165,000 out of the $665,000 currently in circuit breaker. That represents money that rolled over from FY14 because the charges were not laid correctly in a timely manner.
But those could have been, but they just weren't taken at that.
That's correct. We would take $165,000 out of that, leaving a balance of $500,000 in the circuit breaker.
And why would you do that?
When you sum it all together, then the request from the town is $729,091.
And the reason for leaving the $500,000?
Is the explicit recommendation of the consultant and the auditor that represents a prudent number when combined with the expected $215,000 that will be incoming in school choice, as well as the roughly $2.3 million that we expect in a circuit breaker.
You have this all in writing?
Yes.
It's all on these sheets.
Know all the details.
So that's the buffer.
It's about time, don't you think?
Right.
So that's the buffer we were talking about on
That is a buffer to deal with the various uncertainties that remain within the budget.
Mike, I have a couple of questions, okay? And they're probably rhetorical questions, but I think they have to be asked.
Sure.
They haven't been asked yet. You know, as you know, and I'm preaching to the choir here, a lot of people in town are very upset about the situation. A lot of people feel it hasn't been handled correctly. I think there's going to be a hue and cry at the town meeting for the people that were laid off or terminated be reinstated. That's number one. I think there's going to be questions asked as to who's responsible for this. And the question that I have is, number one, where is Frank Tiano tonight when the school department is coming to the town and asking us to approve $750,000 of taxpayer money for the school department? He's not here. He felt it was more important to go to some other meeting rather than come here and face us, all right? That's question number one. You don't have to answer this.
I'll take them
Okay.
at the end, okay?
Okay. The second thing that really kind of knocked me off my chair the other night was when he said he was blindsided. Now, how can you be blindsided when you're supposed to be looking at a budget on a weekly or at least a monthly basis and not see these things happening? I mean, a manager is supposed to look at these things. And my contention is that a lot of times we put people in positions where they're not really qualified. They're great educators, they're great with kids, they're great with curriculums, but they're lousy with figures. And this is an example where we have a school superintendent who does a lot of things great, but he doesn't know figures, he doesn't know a budget, and he didn't see those red flags going up when they were going up for months.
Okay, Tom, that is your opinion.
This is my
And he
opinion.
is not here to defend himself.
I'm just saying these are
Again,
rhetorical
I
questions.
I think there's concrete things
These
that
have
can
to be said. Because
Absolutely.
people are asking these questions. So I'm speaking for those folks that, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to defer these things from the town meeting, which if they're not, they're gonna come up then. And he's gonna have to face them. So please pass these on to him. And I'll send you a copy of them if you'd like,
That's fine.
okay? But I'm not finished yet, thank you. I have some more questions, okay?
There'll be time. Thank you, Kathy.
We have yet to see any contrition from anybody. Nobody has stood up and say, gee, I'm really sorry, we really screwed up, we made a mistake. You know, I've not seen that from Frank Tiano. I've not seen it even from the school committee. And I think that somebody has to stand up and say, hey, I'll take the hit. We really fouled this thing up. That's, okay? And then I think one that's very important is, why did the superintendent make such a knee-jerk reaction to terminate 3 people when he didn't come to the town manager, he didn't come to the Board of Selectmen, nor did he come to the FinCom and let us know? Because I think that not maybe, but definitely, we probably could have fixed that problem for him, and this wouldn't have ended up the way it is right now.
Well,
And I have one more question, and then I'll be done. Where is the superintendent to assure the taxpayers that this will not happen again? And we need to know that. What type of measures are going to be put in place that this will not happen again? And I know you're working on that when your processes in the school committee, but I think these questions must be answered. So that's my spiel. I'm sorry that people are upset about it, but that's what I had to say it, and I've said it, so that's it.
Okay, let me go through, you're right, some of it is
I know I'm
rhetorical,
right.
some of it is making a point. Some of it, though, I think there are actual questions that can be answered. Where is Frank Tiano tonight? Dr. Tiano is down at the Cape. He is at an annual convention. It's a joint convention between the Mass Association of School Committees, the Mass Association of Superintendents. I was down there until about noon today. I came back. I'll be going back down there again tomorrow morning. For school committee members, it's about the only organized professional development we have. For the superintendents, it's one of, I think, 2 big annual meetings. Basically, it's a chance to talk to other people, to hear presentations from other districts. For example, one of the presentations I was at today was cost-saving measures. It was a presentation from a couple of school committees, and one of them laid out a list of things that they had done that successfully saved them money. Item number 1 was something I didn't recognize. Get reimbursement for a 40S region. I thought at the time I understood it, but I think I confused it with a 40R. that's something, you know what, that's an actionable thing, something I learned about down there today. I'm gonna follow up with it by talking to that district and find out if there's something we can do. Another of their recommendations, one of the things that had worked for them, was to put solar on the roofs of schools. Okay, that I recognized. Another that they said had worked for them was, they suggested you investigate the combination of the maintenance departments between the school and the town. Another was that they suggested that you join a regional transportation cooperative to buy. So, you know, I came out of there actually feeling pretty good about some of the things we've done over the last few years, and also recognizing that there's a couple more things that I can dive into. That's the purpose of this convention. Each year, typically, the superintendent and assistant superintendent spend all 3 days at the convention, and at least a couple members of the school committee. This year, Evelyn Thorne and I were both registered to go down. We've gone down. Evelyn's down there tonight. Both the superintendent and assistant superintendent were registered to go to the convention. That happened back in, I don't know, June or July. When this happened, he canceled the reservations, and the assistant superintendent did as well. They've been here this week. They've not been down there. They're trying to get things done. However, the superintendent had agreed to do a presentation on park implementation. One of the things that this district is really quite good at, and in fact, it's the first I've ever seen, it's a double session, so instead of having one presentation, you do 2 of them back to back. He had committed to go down there and do that. It's an opportunity to help other districts learn, and it's something that we take advantage of. That presentation was for tonight. It was a pre-existing item on a schedule. It's not an answer to your rhetorical question, it's an answer to your physical question. That's where he is, that's what he's doing.
May I interject?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm looking at the schedule for that tonight, and that session, Park versus MCAS, was from 4 to 5:15. And then there was a president's dinner, award banquet, and a comedian, Jimmy Tingle, at 6:30.
I don't believe he's at the dinner.
He's not at the dinner? Okay, well, that's my question, because there's nothing scheduled past 5:15 as far as presentations. So, I know a lot of us travel back here for these meetings, and this is a very important situation. And I'm not saying he's not giving a presentation, I'm just looking at the schedule that's posted online by that association, and it's saying that those presentations stopped at 5:15.
Okay.
Kathy, did you have a question?
You know what, I have a couple
All right,
more.
great.
The question about have
Let me
we...
just finish. I happen to attend those meetings. In fact, I had an invitation to attend it for tomorrow because I'm a life member of MASC. They're very excellent programs that they have down there. And although they close the formal presentation at 5 o'clock, there are other activities that go on beyond 5 o'clock that he may attend. So I think it's a very good program for him to be there as superintendent, to be able to get information that would be beneficial to Chelmsford.
They ever talk about budgets?
Yes,
I
they
think
do talk about
They do
budget.
talk about budgets.
Oh, yes.
I think that's ultimately, your evaluation is a personal item. But I want to talk to some of the other things. You asked, have we gotten ourselves into a situation where where we have a superintendent who's not qualified to oversee a budget? Somebody who's come up through the education side, who's good at curriculum and not prepared for the budgetary analysis? My answer to that would be that you must receive a superintendent licensure in order to be eligible for a job as a superintendent. That would be a course of study that is basically organized, I believe, by the Superintendent Association. I think that's the way that the school committee, that's our screen, right? You can ask other members of the school committee, you can ask previous members of the school committee about whether or not, in their judgment, Dr. Tiano was ready to step into that role. A school committee made that judgment, and the guarantee, if you ask about his suitability as an economic person or a financial person, I would say starts with his licensure.
Let me just say, the licensure doesn't guarantee.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't require, the Department of Ed has a program in which you have to participate in to get licensure.
Okay. So it's the Department of Ed that does it, not...
Which, by the way, does include finances.
Where is the contrition? I'm sorry. You cannot believe how sorry I am. I will take responsibility for my role in this. This is heartbreaking. This is never what any of us wanted. We thought we had things under control. We thought we were getting good information. You know, you go through it, you find things that where we're not the best, right? We're not doing things as well as other districts are. And that's pretty harsh right now. I'm not enjoying some of what I'm learning.
You've been thrown under the proverbial school bus, right?
All I can tell you is that, you know, for as long as I'm around, I'm going to work to build a system that does allow for effective oversight. I don't disagree that we didn't get our job done.
Well, we thank you for what you're doing tonight. It's not easy, I know.
The termination of the 3 administrators, the layoff.
Right.
This is something I've talked about with a few other people recently. I think you have to put it in a context. When we got the initial word, which was it was the week before the presentation to the Finance Committee, and I think it was even. It was a known problem. There was the $878,000 in late bills, and there were plans to lay off, basically to draw circuit breaker down to 0, to do all of these things. And it was, I think the decision was made in that world. I'm not the superintendent. I can't tell you exactly what went through his head. I'm reminding you of what the situation was, and reminding you that the situation has changed rather dramatically and repeatedly. That said, if is there room for criticism? Again, that's a personal decision, I think, and you can always evaluate better.
But they're replacing those 2 people with 4 people with a stipend. So there are 2 people to replace each of those administrators, and they're going to be getting a stipend. As I read, there was something that came out last week.
Yeah, that.
$1,200 apiece.
I think right. That would be, that's news to me. I don't know that for a fact.
Send it to you.
Yeah. And finally, where's the superintendent to assure that this will not happen again? I would argue that is not the superintendent's role. I would argue that is the role of the school committee. And I intend to pursue that course.
I think that's very admirable for you, but I think that, the town pays him, a pretty good salary, and I think it's his responsibility to own all of the finances and the scholastics in the town. And I think that, you have a responsibility to oversee, but you don't have total responsibility for it.
Actually, if I could interject here,
Yes.
if I might, and I want to say, I thank you for your questions, and I thank Mike for his answers, but I'd like to interject here a little bit about the role of the school committee. I served on the school committee for 6 years, and I attended 6 of those events on the Cape, and they were very informative and very important for becoming knowledgeable. So as a school committee member, I thought it was vital to go to those things and read your material about the roles of a school committee member and become well-versed in what your responsibilities were. School committee is in charge of the budget. They have line item approval of the budget. And they are in charge of policy and hiring of the superintendent. So they hire him, they review him, and they're in charge of his destiny. Why I bring up the line item budget control is this. The budget was presented on a regular basis to the school committee in a summary format. And the actual position of what was happening, in my opinion, and I think most people would agree with this, what was being presented was not an accurate representation of what was actually happening. And I think that there could have been, with the school committee members, could have taken a more active role in asking questions, and also when the budgeted amount was changed from, line item to line item, that actually requires a vote of the school committee. And so the business manager, from what appears to be, I don't know for sure, but what appears to me, that she was making budget changes without actually seeking approval from the school committee. Had she had to come forward and ask, well, I'm going to reduce this budget item by $1 million and add $1 million here, or 50,000 or whatever, that would lead to questions that would point to an ongoing problem. So I think that the school committee are all valuable members who have offered to do this job. It's a difficult job, and one of their jobs is to ask questions. So in the future, I think they'll be asking more questions. So I think there is some responsibility with the school committee, although I love you all, but so I think that what people aren't talking about here is the communication factor of that. The problem was definitely not articulated either to the school committee and perhaps to the superintendent. I do not know. I feel like it was a summary report with, we're tight, but we're going to use revolving funds, but no actual definition of what the actual situation is. As far as the payroll being all messed up, I don't think the school committee would know that the payroll was not being coded correctly, but that's a problem. So I just think that the situation, the business manager did not accurately address what was happening. And I feel that the communication between all of the various parties could have been improved, and I feel that perhaps there might be an underwriting feeling in this town that the school department gets their money and the town gets this, and we think the school wastes money anyway. So maybe in that small sense that communication or the feeling, not that our town manager, but maybe perhaps the town in general isn't going to be supportive of the school if it comes up with a huge deficit, maybe that communication or that sense of animosity may have made the situation worse. But I think that if you're a manager and you have someone who works for you, and in the past they've given you good and accurate information, I think there could be a tendency to rely on that. But I do think the school committee could have asked more questions as well. And so I think it all comes into one big envelope, but communication.
Thank you, Ken. Patrick?
I do remember the auditor mentioning that many school districts have gone through this kind of problem. I'd like to reiterate what Sheila said, that as a town, we can get together and solve this. I want to thank you, Mike, for coming up, and I can tell you're feeling sorry, but I also believe that great organizations will get great because of problems like this, and we learn from these mistakes, and I think hindsight is always 20/20. This is a very hard situation to deal with. I don't think that the school committee knew this was going to happen.
No.
They would have asked better questions, and I believe that going forward, many departments are going to learn from this, many towns are going to learn from this, that we've actually got to hold people accountable. And I just like to urge everybody to put this behind us. Let's put a system in place to make sure this does not happen again. But we can sit here and talk forever. If we don't take this as a lesson, I think it's a waste of time. I think we've all learned from this. Let's move on.
And I think, as Kathy has said, and Patrick, as you said, going forward, especially when we start to look at fiscal year 16, which we'll be doing after special town meeting, I think the communication is the first and foremost, because there's been a lack. There's been an obvious lack. I mean, even, I believe under the DOR guidelines, correct me if I'm wrong, in the final 2 months of a fiscal year, and on the first 15 days of the next fiscal year, the selectmen, with approval of the finance committee, can make some budget transfers. So it had, at that point, we heard that, hey, we have issues, we're not sure we're gonna be able to move this money around, and we'd been approached, especially since we had a meeting before the end of the fiscal year, a tri-board, something could have been done to stem at least some of this. So I think, as Patrick, you said, we're learning from this, we're going forward from this. There are things that could have been done to alleviate some of this pain, but I think we're stemming now into discussion about the next fiscal year, things to come, and things we will discuss in the future. But right now, we're talking about what we're doing on the suspended town meeting.
That's a good point. Again, just to reiterate what you've already said, this is a multi-step process. We have been focused up till now on getting the numbers right for FY15, really. The next steps, as you know, Mr. Sullivan is also going to do a kind of a process audit of our internal workflow. Once we have those results in hand, we are also going to reach out to MASBO and have them come in and also look at procedures, and I'm hopeful that their scope will be a little bit larger, perhaps, than Mr. Sullivan's. But whether it is or not, I think they're an organization that's worth talking to. If we're serious about building a best-in-class system, we want to get their input as well. We are also going to do additional professional development for this, directed at the school committee in particular, both with Mr. Antonelli and also with MASC. They've offered their assistance as well. It's a multi-part, multi-step process. We know it's early, and we have no choice but to go forward with it.
Just a couple of comments. The superintendent is the chief executive officer, and in my opinion, he should be the person doing a lot of the talking at the meeting rather than school committee members. They certainly have the oversight of the school committee, but I think as I watch some of the activities, I think the superintendent should be more involved in answering questions that are being presented. But let me ask you, we have a problem in the business office, from what I understand. You don't have a business manager now, you have a consultant. And for example, I understand the payroll clerk is on leave, I don't know.
She's out on medical leave.
So there's a problem in the business office. Why hasn't that been addressed? And I've been told that there's a need for more personnel in that office. Why hasn't it been addressed by now to develop a business office that can handle the situation? Nothing has, as far as I know, nothing is happening to address the problems that are in the business office.
I would say that there is nothing happening. This is the second time tonight I'm going to have to say this, but I can't, I really don't want to talk about some of the specifics right now.
Well, all I know is, I'm not talking about the prior prior businessman. What's going to happen? What are you going to do? Nothing? Just say that we can't talk about it?
No. Again, that's a process, and we're working our way through the process, and there's a point at which you have far more liberty
But this has been known
to
for a
discuss it.
while. It's nothing,
I
the process
think
is...
the medical leave, at least, my understanding, was not known for a while. From other people's descriptions, it's a lean staff. And I don't know. We haven't talked about increasing staff there. Typically, when you're confronted with a budget shortfall, adding administrative staff is not the first thing.
In the business office, the answer should be yes. If
Well,
that's to solve the problems in the business office, I certainly think that's a place where you should hire somebody.
I think that's
You're hiring lawyers, you're hiring
useful
consultants,
feedback.
you're hiring everybody else.
To Kathy's point, that's the idea about communication, and sometimes we make assumptions that certain things just aren't good ideas. And maybe we need to be more open. It would be helpful if we had more feedback like that from the Finance Committee. If you're seeing us being seriously understaffed, then that's something that it rises up on our priority list, but also it gives us confidence that it's not unreasonable.
I think you need a manpower analysis to, we personally can't tell if you're understaffed unless we go in there and watch the operation.
I think that's one of the expectations for Mr. Sullivan's full report.
And then the MASBO.
And MASBO as well.
Now, I just wanted to say, Mr. Antonelli, he's the person that's your consultant, so I don't know if people know his
Background?
background.
Yeah.
Can you give
Yeah,
a
he
quick summary?
was for many years the business manager at in the Billerica Public Schools. I will say, I've spoken to Jay Sullivan.
And Greater Lowell.
And Greater Lowell, okay. I've spoken to Jay Sullivan a few times as we go through this. He's basically the head of finance at DESE. When I told him that Mr. Antonelli had come on board as a consultant, it was in the context of a much longer sentence, but his response was, "You got the right guy." It wasn't something I asked him for. It was something that he offered without it being solicited. So right now, I'm feeling good about having Mr. Antonelli as part of the team.
I have one other question for you, Mike. This is, within the number that you're asking for, the 729, there's nothing in there for additional litigation or judgments that may come out of the court.
That is correct.
Should that happen, where's that money gonna come from?
Well, I think there's no, all right, let me walk through this. There's no litigation, right? If there is a dispute about the proper interpretation of a contractual term, the administrator's contract lays out a system whereby you start with grievances to the superintendent, then grievances to the school committee. After that, the issue goes to mediation, and after that, it goes to arbitration. So at no point is there ever a judge involved.
May I ask if that's binding? Arbitration?
Yes.
Okay.
That's, and that contract ought to be online, so if you want to
Probably
take a
is,
look
yeah.
at it. That's the process, right? The other thing is, what if it goes all the way to arbitration and we lose. The remedy would, I believe, simply be to reinstate those people, reinstate the people that have been laid off, and to make them whole with back pay and benefits. So we are expecting a savings of $138,000 from the layoff. I would argue that sets an upper limit on how much damage could occur if an arbitrator finds that the district's interpretation of the contract was incorrect. So,
There's also the business manager as well. Just, right? You've been advised by counsel not to speak about it.
I'm not going to, I don't want to bluster. I understand he's a very good lawyer.
He's a very good lawyer, right. Got a good track record. So, I'm just putting these out there because this is more potential money that may be necessary to fix this problem. So I think it's got to be discussed and it's got to be
I'm not that concerned.
Verbalized, you're not that concerned, okay.
About that.
One question. What is your current budget? It was 50 million, right?
50 million.
What is it now?
Well, right now it's 50 million.
It's still 50 million?
The appropriation has not been increased, right? So that's the appropriated budget. Anyway, I'm sorry, let me finish him real fast, because I'd say that's what the 500,000 plus 215,000 is designed to do, right? That litigation, sped, and utilities are the three major uncertainties in the budget. You asked about this Monday night, how do we know these numbers?
Litigation?
It would be, I'm sorry, arbitration.
Okay.
Right? That would be the reason that there's a request that we not spend down everything to zero.
Okay.
Because would I like to go ask for a much smaller number? I absolutely would, but I don't want to put us in a situation where we have to go back in the spring.
So that money's there for that particular purpose unless you need it for something else?
No. If we don't have a serious problem,
okay. I appreciate your answer. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
No, what I'm saying is, what is, what are you?
Budget.
You have reduced the current budget savings. You had savings, is that correct?
Well, it's all to get back to that 50 million number, right? That's where we're headed for. If the town decides to sell the solar electricity on the market rather than pump it into the schools, we may have to readdress what the right appropriation is, but I'm not, that's down the road, that's not a problem for
Have you
town meeting.
reduced your budget in any way, in any form? You know, stop, you got rid of 3 individuals.
We had 3 layoffs.
Purchasing supplies, whatever.
We've put in, we also had a couple of positions that were open that have gone unfilled. We've put in some line item freezes, although if you look at the FY15s, a lot of them have overrun the appropriated budget already. So
what have you done to?
And one of the things that Mr. Antonelli has already done is set Munis up so that you can no longer insert POs that are in excess of the appropriated budget.
Does that answer your question?
No.
Okay.
The point I'm getting to is, other than the personnel that you haven't rehired, what other adjustments has been made to the budget to save money?
I don't know. Can you give me an example of what you'd be looking for?
Have you said, for example, a department has some textbooks or supplies? Have you said you can't have?
I'm sorry, yes. You know, this number does include, and I don't have that number with me, approximately $130,000 worth of monies that have been identified in the budget that could be frozen, and textbooks are an example of that. We're just not, some textbooks have already been purchased. I think the monies that have not been expended are not, we're not planning on expending them that way this year. I can get you a better answer for that.
What I'm leaning towards is, what at the end of next year, June, how much will we have spent?
It better not be any more than 50 million.
Well, you're going to spend all 50 million.
At this point, yeah, I think that's what we're looking at.
That was the original budget.
Yeah, that was, well, again, and this is one of the areas where I think the old approach to managing the budget just didn't work very well. We were looking, the reports we got were all marked against the appropriated budget. That doesn't address the spending that comes out of grants and revolving accounts. And so what was essentially happening was that the budget was being managed off budget.
Right.
And, you know, at the end of the year, we would figure out, well, how much in the red are we? What do we take it out of here? We take it out of there, out of these revolving accounts. And you know, Mr. Sullivan has made, both Sullivans have made it clear that they don't find that an appropriate way to run a budget. And we need to change that. Because that's going to take a little bit of time. I think that, I'd like to hear that question again from you when we come with our FY16 budget. How are the revolving accounts part of the budget? Not behind a curtain over there. I think we should be able to provide that answer.
Mike, at the tri-board meeting, I brought up the childcare / community ed with the $1 million balance. What I would really, I think would be good is to make sure, and I don't know if Mr. Sullivan or Mr. Antonelli is going to look at that, to make sure that that revolving fund is aggressively being charged for every possible thing through the year.
Mr. Antonelli and I exchanged emails about this afternoon. He said he is going to sit down with Mr. Sullivan in the next couple of days and make sure that the child care revolving account is fully charged. I also reminded him that if there are any other unexpended and unaccounted for, I suppose, revolving funds that could be used to defray the deficit, we need to look at those. Now, for example, we know there's money in the circuit breaker, so it's more complicated than just running a balance, right? What we're looking for is money that's there and also we don't have a plan for spending, right? Circuit breaker, there's money there, but we have a plan to spend it. Even if it's $50,000 somewhere, you know, now's the time to use it.
Okay, given the hour, moving on, does anybody have another question that they'd like to bring up now or not?
I guess I have one, and I don't know if this is actually, Mr. Cohen could speak to this, but I think somewhere along the line, we heard that some communities have established some sort of small stabilization fund for special ed costs that might come in extraordinary or above and beyond. Because, for example, some of these special ed, you know, one year they were $100,000 to a certain group, and then it was $250,000, so that, you know, that maybe there is a small fund that, you know, starts to be established somewhere along the line, that when this type of circumstance could come up, then there could be communication and...
I think there's always the tension between holding money in reserve and minimizing the draw on the community's resources.
Right.
And that's something that we can only get to through communication. And that I think is a valid question for FinCom to ask as we bring a budget forward. I think that's going to have to be examined constantly. How do we balance kind of the need to protect ourselves against unexpected occurrences versus making sure that we don't take any more than we need? Because if we just have 200,000 or 500,000 sitting there, maybe that, you know, are we really doing the best job of managing it?
quick question. Do you feel that the 1.5% increase in the budget, recognizing the savings in the utilities, was a sufficient amount for your budget?
I think if you start from the premise that a 3% increase was a level service budget, that the decision to reduce the increase by $750,000 with the expected ESCO save, because of the expected ESCO savings, I believe that was a reasonable decision. I think there's another question to be asked, though, and that's about whether 3% really represented a level service budget.
What's a level service? I don't know what that
Well,
means.
I think lately, we've used that term to distinguish it from a level funded budget.
So what is it?
Well, the idea is you get enough money to provide the same services that you provided last year with the steps up, the increases in pay, if there's increases in utilities, you can't just spend $50 million every year and get the same thing 5 years down the road that you did this year. One of the criticisms that we've had, I think, of the school committee and of the schools, is that we haven't been proactive enough in kind of identifying our own needs. We've been too passive. When the town manager says, I have 3% for you, we say, great. And not that the 3% is unreasonable, but it's just been okay. And we need to do a better job of bringing a budget forward that identifies all of the expected cost increases. You heard that Monday night, that if you look at the FY15 appropriations, they don't look good compared to the FY14 actuals, and that the FY14 appropriations didn't look good compared to the FY13 actuals. That we're not doing a good enough job of recognizing where our needs are, and it's going to have to be more of a give and take with the town side. Instead of a single discussion that says, here's a number, we're going to have to say, look, this is what we see. And then the manager is going to have to say, this is what I have. There's always going to be that tension. And that's not a bad thing, but we have to be more explicit about it.
Okay, then we can do that planning ahead. And be more honest with each other, would you say? Because it's difficult to be.
More honest, I personally think that the budget season probably has to expand. I think sometimes, when you meet every other week or even every week and you're trying to look at every department, maybe there need to be discussions happening now or December, at least between the superintendent and the town manager, about what they're both seeing for FY16. And where the expected increases are coming from, both on the revenue and the cost sides.
Right. Okay.
I hate to circle back. I just want to ask a quick question. I'm not going to get an answer for it tonight. No, I'm not. But could we just confirm that of the dismissals that were done, that they were done pursuant to MGLC 71, Section 42? So that's
Remind me what 7142 is?
dismissal or demotion of teachers or other employees or school district arbitration.
Does it cover administrators?
It covers, I'm not sure.
So you want the controlling document for...
The controlling document.
For the layoffs?
Yeah, to make sure that things were followed appropriately.
Yep.
Because at least with teachers, I know, under that chapter, there are no punitive damages. There is no nominal damages,
Right.
as you were
Okay.
saying earlier.
Okay. Yeah, no, and, okay. Yes, we can cite there.
Or if we can get an answer from the council.
I suspect that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to end discussion on this.
Just one quick question to Paul. On the municipal administration personnel, if I add them up, you're asking for $379,000 since you've over expended it because of these issues. Can you give us a brief? on each-
Yes, that's next. Darlene's going to go over those items next.
Oh.
This is just one. component.
over those Monday night, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Nothing's changed in the last 3 days.
That's refreshing.
that's what. So you're talking about these other items. That's what Darlene went over. Well, I want to finish this conversation first. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very insightful and your honesty.
I hope this is the first of many.
And you're going to walk away from
Don't
this
take
table
anything
smiling.
personal.
I will try not to. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Monday,
Yes, Darlene went over these other items. Did anything change on these? They're the same. The only thing that changed was the school. So,
Monday, when,
Tri-board.
the tri-board meeting?
did she give what personnel were?
Yes, she did.
There's a full presentation, yeah.
Okay, I missed that one. Okay. I probably wasn't listening.
It was late.
Takes a good man to admit that.
That's true.
Okay, that is Article 4. What I'd like to do is to go to the DPW vehicle maintenance,
Actually,
Article 6 next.
I just have one quick question, and this is dealing with the town side on Article 4 before we proceed. Am I just missing it, or am I not seeing the balance for what we initially had for that article in this number that we have here?
It's a higher.
Because we were looking at OPEB and adjusting the budget, and I'm not seeing that number.
Quite frankly, that's because
We
it's no longer needed. We've had, the assessor, chair of the assessors is here this evening. We've submitted, the Board of Assessors submitted a new growth number to the Department of Revenue, which we expect an answer within a week. That new growth number came in above the estimates, even the estimates that we had going into October town meeting. So when it's almost said and done, believe it or not, we actually would not have had to come back for any additional appropriation to balance the FY15 current budget when everything was done, between the adjustment to the new growth and the adjustment to the overlay as a result of the overlay surplus and what we see overlay going forward. So for all that irresponsible action in the spring, with being conservative, we ended up basically meeting all of our obligations.
Just
And
want to
so
make,
we wouldn't have had to have come back and do anything at the end of the day.
want to make sure that was clear. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Maloney is here, proponent for Article 6 and 7. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll be very brief. Thanks for having me. You're probably looking at the handout, and you'll see that Article 7 says no action.
Six.
I mean, Article 6, I'm sorry, says no action. So I haven't officially pulled that back yet, but I intend to pull that back. Obviously, I've been paying close attention and watching all the meetings, and thank you all for your time attending all those meetings and trying to figure our way through this. So I thought it appropriate, after watching everything that's transpired, to just get out of the way with this petition. Tom made a few comments the other night, about, and it was mostly surrounding feeling like the town has an appropriate cushion to take care of things if anything else pops up or anything else comes along that may be needed as everything gets worked out and resolved over the next several months. So I felt it appropriate to go ahead and remove that article from consideration. But what I would like to say, and what I'd like to ask this board how they feel about, what I'd like to ask is if any remaining funds that are left over after all the decisions are made, and you have plenty of them, and town meeting will have plenty of them, but because I do think it's important and it's fiscally prudent to go ahead and act and try to get this piece of that project done to again, gain the efficiencies that we originally bargained for, as well as try to save close to $1.5 million in financing. So what I would like to ask is that, or maybe this body could recommend that any remaining funds left over after all of these decisions are made go into the stabilization fund, with the hope that maybe in the next year or two, there might be some additional free cash or not, or maybe some other source of funding to where we could go ahead and get this done. I truly believe that if, in the current climate, that if you went out for a debt exclusion, not only would you spend $1.5 million more, you just wouldn't get it. We embarked on this project back in 2011 for a reason, and I think it's important to move ahead with it. But again, in light of the facts, we don't want to stand in the way of the kids in the town. So, having said that, I kind of wanted to ask this body if they would support maybe moving any remaining funds that are left over after all the decisions made to the stabilization fund for future use as to complete this project.
You don't have my support. I
don't
think
have
it should stay as surplus. Why don't you ask Paul to provide you, to implement this thing? The 1.9, is it? Why don't you take it from the stabilization fund and do it? So because you'll save all kinds of money, but if you do it right away, you won't have to pay all of that increase the next 2 or 3 years. Why don't you ask to fund it totally?
I think he's looking at the needs of the entire town.
Well, I'm asking, the stabilization money is, we got about $7 million there. Why not use that?
Well, my personal opinion, and it really doesn't have anything to do with Alpha Road, but my personal opinion is I think the stabilization fund needs to stay exactly where it is so that, we forget that, as our budget grows, we need to maintain a certain percentage within that fund. I'm also concerned about that to make sure that we maintain our good bond ratings and so on. So that's my personal opinion. I am passionate about getting this done. However, it's an inappropriate time in my mind to muddy the waters any more than maybe they are now.
Right, and would you agree that it would be more in the hands of the town meeting to control if it were in stabilization?
I think so, yes. Yeah. It changes what we need.
It would be more in the hands of the town meeting to vote that later.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
So it'd be in
Well,
their
I'm saying
control.
he's passionate
Right.
for this thing, and we will save, I don't know how many millions he said, if we do it now, rather than waiting, 2 years.
We would plan to come back in April, and I think by April, we would know better. I mean, if there was,
April, or maybe next year at this time.
or maybe next year at this time, correct.
I think that's a smart idea, I really do. I think that, I would support that.
We may suffer some slight escalation, but but also we're putting the money in, and it's gonna gain some interest
Yes.
and so on. So I think, again, it's the fiscally prudent thing to
Well,
do.
my
so.
recommendation has been always to wait till April. When the vote came on that, I voted that it'd be taken up in April.
Okay.
Any other questions about Article 6? Did you want to speak about?
Article 7, I fully plan to bring forward, and for all of same reasons that I explained to you prior, so I appreciate your consideration on that. And
That is in relation to the demolition of the center fire
that is-
station.
That's correct, yes. So, again, for all the reasons that we've talked about in the past, I just don't think it's a good idea to ever put any RFP out for that piece of property. It's town property, let's keep it town property
Would you like to
forever.
just expound a little bit upon what it would take to put this building into a condition that it would be usable? Because there are some people in town that really want to do what they call a due diligence, and they want to look at this and maybe use it for a museum or something like that. What would it cost to, take out the asbestos, bring it up to code, shore it up so that it's a building that is not going to crumble and fall, just so that the people know what those numbers are?
Based on estimates from probably around 2007, We had looked originally, I think I explained this last time I was here, that we had looked at different options, and we were looking at get-by options, if you will, like just replacing the floor, doing some minor renovations, just to keep the guys in a certain condition for a period of time until the town could afford to do things. So, based on the different estimates that we've received and being in the business and so on, I think I can guarantee you that you would be spending $1 to $2 million, probably much closer to the $2 million to try to get that building in an appropriate condition that would be suitable for the town.
Because it's a different use, you'd have to do that anyway.
Well, and then, and then the other thing is if the building was conveyed to somebody else, then you got to change of use, and so that now, you have to bring that up to seismic code, you have to bring up all your electrical, plumbing, and so on. So the Daigle report that we submitted to you says that it's just not a good candidate for repair or renovation. So, and mostly because it's not.
Would you put it in the sick building category?
Yeah, it's pretty close to that. It's pretty close to that. So, and again, it's in our town center. It's, the chief will board it up when the time comes. He is concerned of people getting in and stealing copper. I hear people brush aside the safety factor. The fact is that if a kid, got into that basement and knocked out one of those timbers, the timbers that are supported above by the timbers that are upright are a couple of 100 pounds apiece. So, I mean, kids in there just playing around in that basement, we could have a serious problem on our hands, not to mention any other myriad of things that could happen, but it's a safety, and I don't want to beat that to death, but just all the same reasons that we spoke of before, but we just think it would be totally cost prohibitive to find any use for the town, and I really don't think that putting an RFP out to see what different entities may come up with is appropriate for that building and a valuable town piece of property, and what the potential that it has to be, a great addition to the center there.
It's a piece of open space.
It's a piece of open space, and we're looking at buying a piece of open space, and, speaking of buying the piece of open space, the same condition applies. There's some in town that would rather see things like that DPW go for debt exclusion. If we have the money, we do it. It's no different than buying that house.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your patience waiting.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you very much.
Article 8 is in relation to reducing the tax levy. Paul, did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I'm not recommending any action under this article. I don't know, the Board of Selectmen may have a request on Monday evening. Thus far, they've not discussed or arrived upon a number, but at this point, again, I don't want to repeat, I'm very respectful of your time, but given all that we're looking at, and also not, the issue with the levy is it's fine, and people can make arguments on both sides, but again, I'm trying to look at it in a long-term basis. And this sort of ties into the next article on stabilization fund. The question was sort of asked earlier, with the school budget is $50 million. What we heard is they have a deficit, forgetting about the carryover deficit from 14 over expenditures, of about $580,000, okay? Mm-hmm. And then there's probably a little bit on the town side as well in terms of some of the issues with the library and so forth. So let's say it's 600, just to use a round number. So that means we start preparing the 16 budget, okay? We've got to bail out that 600,000 before we start looking at because what's going to happen in 16? We have all the collective bargaining agreements have to be met, okay? And this sort of goes to the 3% in the budget process when we talked to the superintendent and prepared the budget and back in the spring and before you last winter. We looked at what are our contractual obligations in terms of step increases and the contractual increase in the contract. And then you've got other expenses such as utilities and such as special ed and so forth. And the concern I have is how do we even think, and look at the struggles, and you kind of heard Mike mention it this evening, how do you think that we could not go below the levy limit next year, even if we wanted to use some cash this year? And then the question then becomes in terms of long-term sustainability. So to bring it all the way around, many people were alarmed back in April about we were doing 600 in arrears to fund a budget, and it was fiscally irresponsible and everything else. Well, at the end of the fall town meeting in 2 weeks, we're probably going to be 600,000+ in arrears on a sustainable basis. And so that's the concern I have going forward. And the bigger concern now is, and you heard it earlier in Mike's presentation on a Monday night from the auditors, look at the trends, okay? The utility thing, we can nail that down because we know that's gonna come in line. But the real trends of what's going on there in terms of special education, I mean, you heard members speaking about this on Monday night. Hey, we brought these kids in-house to save costs, and what do we saw happen? Our costs for in-service went up, and then our tuitions didn't go down, and then we heard other communities are having these same problems. What's the belief that trend isn't gonna continue beyond this year, okay? And it's not a knock or anything, it's just a reality, and this is the pressures. And I sit here, and I hear about the issues of staffing in the school business office. Well, if we're gonna do a manpower staffing, we ought not just study those departments that have suffered a crisis, because I can tell you, you wanna do a manpower study, we can do one in our collector's office, and we can do one in our accounting office, and so forth. And we can do one in the fire department, and so forth. I mean, I've got a fire chief who wants additional people, to operate apparatus and serve the town. And the bottom line is, I don't doubt we're understaffed in some of the school functions, no question. But it wasn't because I didn't want to give the schools more money. And it wasn't because it was just, hey, here's your number, go home and live with it. It was because, and Kathy knows, I sat with her across the table and so forth for years. It's a question of, what are these uncontrolled costs that we have on the town side? And it's not because, we're doing anything different on our side. It's because we do just what you described. We come back, and John's going to go in a few weeks. He's going to go to Middlesex Retirement Board meeting in December. And he's going to come back and say, hey, Paul, look what Middlesex is looking for us next year. It's a X% increase. And then we're going to see the health insurance. And we talked about this the other night. A year ago, and part of the reason we had extra free cash this year was because of the fact that the Medicare rates that go effective on January 1st went down 2.7%. Well, this year, they're back to the norm of going up 5%. So the scary part is we're not going to have that extra cash this year to go to free cash. And also, what's it going to be next year? And on, and that's how it goes. So it's not a question of that, gee, we didn't, when I had money to fund town departments, I slighted the school department.
I don't think you slighted the school department.
No, but
I'm just saying.
But it's not, I didn't, and it's not because I didn't want to do full-day kindergarten. It was a question of how can we maintain operations? And that's the concern I have going forward. And I'm just alarmed by the trend, and therefore, that's the underlying concern I have with these recommendations. And that's why, coming to this article, bringing it full home, is I don't recommend any action to go the levy, because clearly we're not operating on a sustainable basis below the levy. Let's be clear with that. And then all we would be doing is drawing our reserves down to create an artificial decline that's only going to bounce back up. And then coming to the next article, the stabilization fund, I sincerely believe that we need to put funding in there, because we may need that to truly stabilize the community. Because, the numbers we're talking about, again, just going back to the school side, I'm sure that when the school committee, or I shouldn't say I'm sure, I would expect that when the school committee prepares the desired budget, requested budget for 16, they're gonna have those positions in there. Why wouldn't they? And they're probably gonna say, hey, you know what? Realistically, we need another person in the business office, and so forth. And believe me, I get those same requests from other departments as well. And they're legitimate, and so that's the concern I have. It's, and that's why we've always done this level service model, because quite frankly, that was sort of the best we could obtain, and that was with the struggle. So I'll leave it at that. So again, I was recommending nothing under this article, and then for the last article, basically I was putting whatever was left under my recommendations would be the 931, 348 from free cash after you do the other ones, if you do the other ones. And then I would transfer the overlay surplus also into the stabilization fund. And I understand Pat's proposal, and I support it in concept. But again, if I felt that comfortable, I would have sort of been what Strat's saying, well, why don't we just fund it? Well, Strat really didn't say that, but I think he was suggesting is, well, why aren't you just funding it now? And I would sort of, although he really wants to do April, but the bottom line is, you're right. And if at all possible, we would have wanted to do it now, and that's where we were, several weeks ago, was let's avoid another year of escalation, let's avoid borrowing. But at this point, I don't think we can comfortably do that. So that's why I'm saying, put it in stabilization. And as I noted in my memo, if we were to do that, our stabilization would be about 7.6%, which is at that midpoint of the 5 to 10% that's not only a town goal, but sort of the industry type of standard of what your reserve should be. And so anyway, that's where we're at. I'm trying to be respectful of the late hour.
Can I just ask one quick
Sure.
question? Oh, go ahead.
I have a very quick one. I don't think we heard your recommendation, at least verbally, on Article 7.
No action.
No.
Article 7 being, wait a minute.
No.
Article 7 being the fire station?
Yes.
I support it, and it's in my memo. The bottom line is, the reason I support it, despite everything else that's going on, is that's a public safety issue. When the fire chief comes to me, and he's gonna come to you, and he's gonna come to town meeting, and says that this is a public safety concern, of having that vacant building in the center of the community, and that if it isn't removed, then he's gonna board it up to FEMA standards, that, to me, that's a public safety concern. And to the point where, it's an attractive nuisance, and when the building inspector says to me, he doesn't see that building can come online in terms of effective use because of all the code issues from seismic and ADA and all the other issues and that you heard. And then finally, for those who say, well, why not just put an RFP out to sell it if that's what the town wants to do? Well, first of all, if the building is raised and the site's graded, the town at a future town meeting can decide whether to sell the property or not, or lease it, or do nothing, or park, or whatever they want to do. However, if you want the best financial return from the town in terms of a sale, then my advice would be to take the building down, because if you go to try to put it for sale as is, there's going to be a big uncertainty in terms of what's in that building. And you're not going to know that until you open it up. In terms of you open up that building and see, because the first thing we're going to do, if this goes forward, is you're going to do a hazardous materials analysis. And you're going to have to go through that building, you have to take out the fuel tank and so forth, you have to do the asbestos and other testing. And if you don't have that type of work done and completed, then the buyer, if you wanted to sell it, is going to basically put in a factor that's going to discount for that, so you end up costing yourself money. So for those who say, well, just put an RFP out and sell it, in essence, you would really it would be a short-sighted move, because if you really wanted to get top dollar, you would actually clean the building, clean the site, and then sell it, because any viable buyer is going to have to remove that building, given what you heard for the cost of rehab, and also the uncertainty of what may be in the building. And again, most recently, is several weeks ago, they had that same problem when they tried to take down the Drake at Town Hall. They get in there and they said, oh my goodness, we didn't realize that we had these type of materials in the building, and they had it stopped and everything, and costs were incurred. So again, the prudent course of action, I believe, is to remove the public safety hazard. Then the town can have ample time to decide what to do, and in fact, they probably may have a better sense of what to do at the site if the building's not on it. So anyway.
Paul, why not, in my opinion, why not delay this until April meeting?
Because...
And let people talk about it, present different options, and so forth. I think whatever you say about the hazard and so forth, certainly there's some truth to that. But it seems to me that there are a lot of people here who would like to have a discussion, maybe set up a committee to go over this, and I have no problem with having it knocked down, but I think a delay would be appropriate, that's all.
But that's what will happen. If the building is torn down, we'll have all winter and all spring and forever, as long as you want, to discuss what to do with the site.
No, I'm saying as it is.
If you leave it there, then you've got that safety hazard and nuisance of a building on the site. And I can't tell you if and when people are going to come in through behind the building and steal, or cause other problems in the building, or other issues. Quite frankly, let's be honest, we've known that this building was going to be vacated for a good 12 to 18 months. And, and even Pat made in his presentation in the spring, it sort of made a joking reference to, but, what could we do at the site? Maybe it would be a park and so forth. So,
Central Park.
So the bottom line is there has been time, and I just haven't heard or seen a proposal other than one that was floated a couple of weeks ago about making it a museum. And then I know some have talked about a Civil War monument and so forth, but I just haven't seen that effort going in to that site.
And can we also state that it's been discussed at length that there is a decommissioning cost that will happen no matter what.
Right.
So,
And I will have an insurance issue, going back to your other issue.
For the
That
vacancy
building-
issue.
That building's gonna sit vacant, and then I'm gonna have to notify the insurer and have to get a special policy on that building as well as the issue of, I'm gonna have to have somebody go in there because, you know, there is a drainage problem in that building, so you just can't just shut it off. You've gotta have somebody going in there, checking it and operating it, because otherwise you're gonna have bigger problems, you know, to deal with, so.
Paul?
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry to bother you,
Okay. No, it's
and
all right.
everybody else.
I'm trying to
But
be respectful.
I just wanted to ask this question on the stabilization fund. Would there be any benefit to, instead of moving all of it into stabilization, keeping some of it in free cash? I mean,
No,
like-
no. Both funds can be used for any lawful purpose,
Okay.
okay? The difference is, a free cash appropriation is 50%, a stabilization fund is a 2/3 vote.
So there's no real,
There's no real difference. However, if one wants to be fiscally conservative, and the town, this has been a practice well before I arrived, was to put it all into stabilization and therefore require a 2/3 vote to use that resource going out.
okay, I just wanted
So that
to,
is the difference, right, because otherwise you could just leave it in free cash.
Yeah,
But that is the difference. You know, it wasn't that way a generation ago, until they reformed the law during, I think it was probably 2 fiscal crises ago, they modified the law to provide municipal relief, and they opened up the stabilization fund for any lawful purpose. Before, it was limited to capital and other items that you could borrow for, such as land and capital improvements and so forth. And then when everything got bad, and I think it was I think it was during the Romney administration, then they basically said, you know what, we're going to change that and allow it for any lawful purpose. So that was municipal relief back then. And so now the only difference between the two funds is the vote to get the money out. So again, being fiscally conservative, the 2/3 sort of makes it a higher threshold for the community.
I have a question.
One quick question.
Yeah.
By having it in surplus and carrying it over to next year,
Yeah.
that could be used as a revenue to reduce the budget, correct? As like any other.
Well, yeah, you could use stabilization fund to reduce
So
the
can
budget.
you use the stabilization fund,
For
but
any
it
lawful
requires a
purpose.
2/3 vote?
Right, requires a 2/3 vote for any lawful purpose.
Patrick, did you have a question?
No, I just suggest that we just point to another.
I'd like to get that done tonight. So, Paula, I have a question. If we did not, Article 6 was withdrawn, and we can recommend to add it to stabilization, we would add that amount to this existing 16.
Right, so that's what I have in my draft motion for Article 9, has that full amount. Again, the 931 and the 685, but again, that also assumed no funding for the Mill Road parcel as well, because you have to have a funding source for that as well. This would obviously come after that vote, but, yeah, so if something is modified along the way, we're obviously
Right.
gonna have to keep track of it, but.
Right.
But these amounts here would assume the no funding for the DPW, the no purchase of the Mill Road, and also no item for the previous article for
So if we voted
reducing the
this-
levy.
I'm sorry, if we
You
voted
voted
this
that
tonight.
number, and you would then have to fund Mill Road, you'd have to revise your recommendation on this article, or use a different funding source, such
So-
as stable, but it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense at one town meeting to take money out of stabilization and then put it back in.
Yeah.
That would be circuitous.
what we could do is we could vote on the available funds remaining going into stabilization,
Yeah,
as
you can
opposed
do
to a
that.
certain number.
That's
Yeah.
right, very good.
Yeah.
And we would vote this amount tonight, if we choose to.
When we do the article.
I see,
Mr. Joyce has a question.
Speak against the article?
Yes, yes, yes.
The one we're on, the,
Fire station.
Nine
Oh,
or
9?
well, actually, the fire, the
Article 7.
demolition. Yeah, demolition of the fire. I just want to make it clear that about the RFP, that's something that I've been talking about, okay? But what I would ask is that an RFP be done as part of their due diligence, because they haven't given us any other options besides this. But anyway, to lease it on a long-term basis with the leaseor person would do the upgrades and maybe give them an extended lease, like a 20-year lease, and they could spread that improvement cost over 20 years.
So this would be a work in progress for 20 years?
No, it would be, they could pay for it.
Over the 20 years,
Yeah.
but they would,
Right.
but we
So
don't
if
know
we-
what those costs would be at this time.
No,
We
but
have no
what I'm
idea.
saying is if they were to do an RFP and say, what do you want to put there? And include in the RFP that the cost of de-letting and everything else that's in there will be their cost and not the town's cost. And then have them come up with proposals,
Right, and this would take a lot of time. And
whatever it takes, yeah.
It's going to be vacant shortly.
Well, for about $1,000, you could put enough probes in that building so that if somebody broke a window, it would sound an alarm to the police station. Just an idea.
It's also putting the town in the real estate business, too.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, but, you know, if they could improve the building and, you know, do it for a cost that,
What sane buyer would buy that
No.
building and then try to spend $2 million to...
we don't know if it's really 2 million, outside of the one estimate that Pat has given us, and the former engineer, architectural company.
There you go.
Right, Daigle, who basically had a previous relationship with us, so they're gonna basically say whatever, you know, is favorable.
I mean, they had a previous contract with us.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is I'd bring in a third party to go through it.
That would cost more money, too, to do that.
Oh.
Okay,
Just an idea.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's vote on these papers.
So I must ask, are we ready to vote?
Jeez, okay?
You all right?
What was that?
We weren't that mean to you.
Does the committee feel we're ready to vote
I'm ready to vote.
I think so.
for the reconsiderations of
Yep.
4, 6, 7, 8, and 9?
Yep.
I'm ready.
Okay. Strat?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to ask for a motion on Article 4 in relation to the fiscal year 15 budget.
I move that we vote to recommend Article 4 FY15 budget adjustment of $1,108,591 to come from free cash as itemized in the budget amendment. Do you want me to read all those amounts? I don't know. Line item 1, municipal administration personnel services, $1,205. Line item 2.
12,500.
12,500, excuse me, thank you. Line item 2, municipal administration expenses, 51,000. Line item 3, Chelmsford Public School Department expenses, 729,091. Line item 4, public safety personnel services, 275,000. Line item 10, municipal facilities expenses, $10,000. Line item 15, library personnel services, $31,000.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I just have a quick question.
Go right ahead.
I added up Paul, the free cash, let me get my piece of paper here somewhere. It looks like, you said we had 2.6 million in the total availability.
Available right now, we have $2,331,289.
Okay, that answers the question, okay. I used 2.6 and I was gonna say, what happened to that $300,000?
Article 5.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That's one. Nay.
And the reason I'm voting nay is because the superintendent did not see fit to come here tonight to ask us for the money. had he come, I would have had no problem voting for it.
Okay, please make note. Thank you. Next article will be Article number 6, the DPW vehicle maintenance bays. It has been withdrawn, so we really do not need to vote on that. Article 7, the demolition of the fire station, in the amount of $150,000. I'd like a motion, please.
Make a motion. Move that the town transfer from free cash the sum of $150,000 to fund the demolition and disposal of the town-owned center fire station building located at 7 North Road and to grade the site to the level of the roadway.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Please note. Thank you very much. Article 8, reduce tax levy. I think we need to, we had a no action on that before. I think we need to
Make a motion.
Actually, I don't think we had a no action. I think we actually voted against.
vote against it, not to
Yeah.
recommend.
Right.
So I'd like a motion.
I would like to make a motion that the Finance Committee make a recommend against for Article number 8, reduce tax levy.
Not to recommend this?
Not to recommend.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Please note. Thank you. One opposed. And then Article 9, stabilization fund. Could I please have a motion?
I will make a motion that we vote to recommend moving a total of $1,607,000. Oh,
No.
you're not going to use the amount?
Actually, can I make a motion?
Please do it,
Yes.
right.
I'd like to move that the town transfer from free cash the remaining available funds from the overlay surplus into, and free cash into the general stabilization fund.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Please note. One opposed. Those are the end of the articles. We're going to be taking article at the special town meeting before the special town meeting on November 17th. We'll be readdressing special town meeting Article 2, 101 Mill Road. And I will ask for a meeting at that time at 7 o'clock before the meeting starts at 7:30 on the 17th. Okay, I have on the agenda committee discussions after our votes. Does anybody have any discussion? I think we've said it all.
Well discussed out.
Is there any public
Actually,
input?
I do
You
have one discussion.
Okay.
And it's in relation to one of the opposing votes that was made earlier.
Yes.
I would like to state, in addition to our transfer of the monies to the school administration, I am dismayed and disheartened that the superintendent did not see fit to be here tonight. I think it was possible. I think it was something that should have happened. I do, however, note that the school committee chairman was here tonight, that the school committee does have oversight over the budget. They have deliberated. I attended. I know the chairperson attended the school committee meeting. It's something that has to be paid. I think if it doesn't get paid, there will be issues as far as legal ramifications. So while I support it being paid, I understand why you made the vote the way you did.
Thank you. Yes. John Souza?
Just a couple of, John Souza, 88 Carlisle Street, Finance Director. Just a couple of quick comments. I know the hour's late. Just on school budget development and staffing levels, just real quick. And I just want to preface this, none of this is directed at the school committee chair. I think he's doing an admirable job in a very difficult situation. on the school budget development, one of the things that's come to my mind as I look at this is, you know that when we come before the Finance Committee with all the general government departments, we give you details on whether it's police, fire, public works, we give you details showing every employee, current salary, proposed salary. One of the things I'd like to see, and it's just a recommendation, is the school committee does have hundreds of employees, but it can be in electronic format. When the budget proposal comes for 16, I, for one, don't want to see, estimated salary increases for steps or whatever. I'd like to see the detail. If it's 300 teachers, then show us current steps, where they're going, just like we do for the general government departments. I think that will go a long way to show the detail that's needed. And the other thing is, on the staffing levels in the business office, because I've heard this from a few different sources. I have no doubt that it's understaffed at the present time, but it would have to be looked at. But as the town manager said, I'm just speaking for myself at this stage, the town manager's addressed, we do have needs on the general government side. What I would say to that is, having worked there as late as 2007, there were positions in place. For example, you had a administrative employee that she used to split her time between submitting, processing bills, payables, invoices, and working, doing payroll part-time. So then if you get in a situation where your payroll person is out, you have a backup to go to and you're not left high and dry. There's also, I think there were 2 or 3 positions, so just as the things I'm hearing, I heard in a public meeting, we've all been to so many over the past few weeks, I'm kind of losing track of which meeting I heard this at, but I also heard that all of the, I believe it was the superintendent said, since the trial for the recession, all the school positions have now been restored to the certain FTE levels. So that concerns me, because if the school business office is understaffed, then a conscious decision was made by someone to eliminate those positions, either through attrition or some other way.
I don't think that's, I don't know about the being returned to the full-time. I don't know, I should check that.
He said it, he said it.
Because I think one of the things they always show is this is what it used to be, and this is where it is here. So I don't think, when we had those mid-year cuts and the override fail, I don't think that they've completely restored, but
Yeah,
I don't know. But I think you should clarify that.
I'd like to see that clarified. The other thing is, each year, when the town manager's budget manual is put together for the town meeting, this is the fixed spiral bound book, there's a chart in there that we do, and we show the FTEs for the general government and the schools. Last year, when I asked for a listing of FTEs, I was given the exact same FTE total and told it has not changed. So I'm seriously doubting if that's the case. So again, this is just stuff that can be worked on as we start to work on this over the coming months. But for the FY16 budget development, I'd like to see backup for these FTE totals, because I just find it hard to believe that there wasn't one, in a department that size, that there wasn't any change. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? And there's no press questions, I see. I'd like to ask for an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.